Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of mindWATCH. Now, this week is going to be a little bit different. So, if you remember from the previous two episodes of mindWATCH, we had a special guest on, and he is actually going to be subbing in for Dan because Dan unfortunately could not make it to this week's episode. So, go ahead and introduce yourself again.
Hello, I am the special guest. I am Ryan Shull, and I am Thomas's father.
Yeah, so this week's episode is going to be mainly about meditation and kind of like our journey, like our meditation journey and stuff like that. And we'll get into that soon. But first, I just want to ask you how your week has been and so far.
So far it's been great.
Yeah?
Yeah, I got a lot done today and actually achieved a couple of goals that I had set for myself. So, yeah, I can say so far it's been a pretty good one. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good, and I'm still keeping up with my meditations, trying to do every day. But I actually recently just got, as you know, another job that I'm currently doing, so that's taking up a lot of my time. But I still, on the days that I'm not able to do the meditations, I still find time to do it the next day.
Yeah.
And I also try not to beat myself up over like not going to the gym, because the way that I sort of see it is like part of my job is that I'm really active, like walking around and stuff like that. So I'm still being active like at my job. So it's not like I'm not just sitting around being lazy.
Right.
So I'm not exactly trying to like beat myself up over that type of thing.
No, and that's one of the things about meditation is, especially if you're first starting out, you don't beat yourself up if you're not being the perfect meditator, because you won't be.
Exactly.
And even people who have done it for a very long time still struggle with, trying to stay focused and that kind of thing. But I guess we'll get into that when we go through the questions.
Yeah, I mean, including myself, because I've been meditating for a decent amount of time now, and I still have days where I just have a really hard time being in the present moment. So, and you just gotta learn to forgive yourself, and that just comes with time and more practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
I have those days all the time.
Yeah, and it's completely fine. It's completely fine.
It is.
And so with that being said, we're gonna sort of lead in. So I have like a list of questions, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask my dad some questions, and we'll just kind of bounce off each other for a little bit. So the first question about our meditation journey is, what was your perception of meditation before you started meditating, and what was your perception of it after? Like, did anything change? Do you still feel the same way? Like, how does your thought process on meditation changed?
Well, before I started meditating, I kind of thought it was a hippy-dippy new age kind of thing, and I kind of viewed it as, I guess, almost quasi-religious, which it's not. Now having started practicing it, and full disclosure, I am very new at this. I've only been doing it for a few months. It's just a technique that people have been practicing for, millennia, pretty much, in various cultures. But it's just a way to calm your mind because, as we go through the day, I'm sure everyone can relate to this. Your mind is going in 100 different directions all at once. And that can create various states of worry or anxiety or stress. And this is just a way of taking time out of the day to just stop and manage that and just try to stay in the present moment and clear those thoughts out and get back to a point where you're calm and steady and not as freaked out about whatever it is that's freaking you out at the moment.
So would you say beforehand you thought it was some kind of hippie mumbo jumbo, and then
Yeah, I
afterwards
just had this picture in my mind of like a guy sitting on a mountaintop in a lotus position with a turban on his head, and it's not it. That's not it
That's
at
the
all.
very sort of like stereotypical image that comes to your head
Yeah, we're a bunch of hippies sitting around in a circle in a commune out in
from
Northern
the
California.
1970s,
Something like that.
make love not
That
war type
don't,
of
yeah, that
situation.
don't, shave
Which
or
all
cut
that
their
stuff,
hair.
is still great, but maybe they were just ahead of our time. Maybe
Yeah.
the hippies
Well,
were
could
way ahead
be.
of our time.
No, if they were meditating, they were doing a good thing. So,
So yeah, I sort of had the same thing, maybe not as like extreme because meditation, I just wasn't aware of it. Like I knew what meditation was, but it's just something that I never really thought about. And I'm gonna mention Lisa Goodwin again because we've mentioned her several times on the podcast beforehand. But in high school and especially like my first year or so of college with like tests and like social pressures and things like that, I had a lot of internalized anxiety. Like when I get anxiety, I'm not the type of person to like hyperventilate and things like that. It's not external for me. It's very like internalized. And I noticed that like throughout high school and especially going into college, like a lot of that internalized anxiety was really starting to like take a toll on my body. Like the reason why I've mentioned this before, but like on a podcast, but like I take Alexander lessons with one of my coaches, and that's to really help relax the body, and I truly believe that like that internalized anxiety took an effect sort of like on my muscles and on my joints and things like that to where I had sort of like a slouched posture, and that's kind of where I could identify where I carried a lot of my anxiety, and then once I was introduced to it by Dan and by Lisa, it would sort of like open me up to a whole entire new world, to something that I could be excited about, something that I could be like. It's not necessarily like it's not gonna cure you of your anxiety, but it's something that definitely gives you awareness on what to do to approach it. You know what I mean?
right. It's a tool. It's something useful that you can do, and you can do it pretty much at any time. I mean, you know, obviously you have to make time and space for it, but and at the beginning, at least this is my experience, it might seem like it's a chore. Like, oh geez, I have to go meditate. But then you get to a point where you start to actually look forward to it because of the effects and the benefits that come from it. And I didn't know you had that much anxiety in high school.
Yeah. Well, it's just I feel like especially nowadays with a lot of young people, especially with like with social media and all that kind of stuff.
Well, you guys are growing up with a lot of stuff that I didn't have to worry about, and
And there's just a lot of things you got to pay attention to, and sometimes that could be extremely overwhelming in addition to what you're dealing with at school and things like that. So
yeah.
I wouldn't say it was an overwhelming amount of anxiety, but like it was something that I internalized a lot as, I want to say as a youth because I'm 24 now, but like when I was in high school and college like that. But like meditation has given me the tools to sort of know that anxiety is just a feeling for me, and it sort of like helps me bring it back to the present moment.
Right.
So, and I kind of think we already answered this next question, but what is meditation to you? Like, what is your definition of meditation? And you've kind of already like went upon it,
but I mean, I can, like, for a technical type of definition, if that's what you want to call it, meditating is just kind of closing your eyes, trying to quiet your mind by focusing on your breath. And especially if you take deep breaths in and then exhale through your mouth, that actually, I've been told, releases certain chemicals in your brain that calm you down.
Yeah.
So there's some science behind this.
It activates I forget what the name of the nerve is, but it activates a certain nerve that's supposed to relax.
Yeah,
you.
a certain area of your brain that is where all your anxiety is concentrated. It will help calm that area down. And I'm not obviously a doctor. I don't know what it's called, and I couldn't tell you what studies cite this, but I've been told by various people who are who do have degrees in that area that it's true that those types of breaths will calm you down physically. And then while you're sitting there, if you're trying to focus just on your breathing, you're going to want, your mind is going to wander, especially at the beginning. And if your mind wanders, you just come back and say, okay, my mind is wandering. I need to focus on my breathing again. And it's just training your brain to keep doing that. And you do that at the beginning for like 5 or 10 minutes. And as you get better at it, you increase the time. But that's sort of that's all it is. It's just taking time to be quiet and be present and just be with yourself instead of, running around with 100 different thoughts of what you've got to do that day or what you've got to do next week or
so, yeah,
whatever it might be.
Something in the future and maybe something that's in the past.
Right, because that's usually what causes anxiety is, fear of the unknown or what's going to happen. And a lot of it's self-created. And this is just a chance for you to kind of sit there and put all that aside and just focus on one thing and forget about all of those other thoughts that are causing you distress.
And it's important to remember it's okay to feel those feelings of anxiety because we don't want to necessarily push them away.
Right. I'm not saying push them away all the time, but this is just a chance to get your body and your mind back into a place of calmness. We're all human. We're going to feel anxiety. We're going to feel the whole range of emotions.
It's not going to magically go away.
Life happens. It's just, we can't get around that. But it's a way to cope better with those types of feelings.
Well, I think you summed it up perfectly. I don't think I need to give my definition. So let's go straight into the next question. And the next question is, when and why did you start meditating?
Well, as I mentioned, I started just a few months ago. And the why was because I guess I was at the end of my rope. I don't know. I just say, I just mean that, nothing I had tried in the past I was having anxiety to the point where I needed to try something. And I thought to myself, what can it hurt to just give it a shot? As weird as I might think it is, let me just try it. And I'm glad I did because it's, as I said, I'm still a newbie at this, but and I struggle every time I go to meditate. My mind just goes off and I'll start thinking about something or some stupid song I heard on, my
from the 1980s.
Yeah, from the 80s.
I know some Madonna
some terrible 80s song.
Maybe a Madonna song, probably.
Maybe. But will get stuck in my head or whatever it might be, and I'll bring myself back. So I'm getting a little better at it, little by little, and that's the whole point. It's not something you're gonna be an expert at overnight, and it's something you're never going to really be an expert at. I've heard from people like Lisa, who have been doing it for a good portion of their lives, who still
and like her life is centered around this kind of stuff,
right? And yeah, she's actually is a life coach. She teaches other people how to do this, and she says still her mind will wander sometimes while she's meditating. So it's, perfectly natural, but she's able to get back to focusing on what she's focusing on quicker than she was in the past. And that's the kind of the goal you're reaching for.
And that just kind of comes with persistence and
you just have to make it a habit.
Yeah.
You have to do it on a consistent basis. And that's the other thing I've struggled with is doing it on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and one of the hardest parts, especially when you're starting out, is learning to be okay with that it's not going to be perfect in the beginning.
Right.
So it's important to be comfortable with the fact that it's not going to be perfect every single time.
Right. The secret is not to beat yourself up over it. It's not a big deal. You'll just, try it again the next time. Yeah. And that's all.
Exactly. All right, so for me, I started meditating, I think like a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. I think that's when I went to the first foundation course. But I truly didn't start really meditating like consistently until the beginning of quarantine. Because in the beginning of quarantine, I'm like, well, I'm in the house. I really have no excuse now. I guess I can
No.
use this as my opportunity to try this consistently.
We all have, actually.
Yeah.
That's been one of the few benefits of quarantine.
Yeah, because yeah, that's one of the good things about what's happening right now is that us who are well enough to be in this position and thankful enough to be in the position that we're in, we have the luxury of being able to focus on ourselves, whether it be like, exercising consistently or meditating consistently. So this was a really great opportunity for me to sort of like be okay. I can actually start to get really serious about this. And for the why I started meditating, it's kind of basically what I was talking about before. It's just I needed to find a way that I could help deal with my anxiety. And I didn't necessarily want to go to like a therapist or anything like that. I kind of wanted to be more self-disciplined because I feel like that would sort of like help me grow as a person. And I feel like meditating on my own was something that would help me grow in terms of like my self-discipline and things like that. So that's kind of like why I started meditating, was to sort of like prove to myself that I could, cope with my anxiety on my own.
That's great.
So
That's really great. Yeah, it is. It is a definitely a discipline, and it's like, when you start going to the gym, you'll get on the treadmill and you're out of breath within 30 seconds. But if you keep at it, 6 months later, you're running 3 miles in less than a half an hour.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's definitely something you have to keep at, and but the rewards will be great if you do. I think the rewards for me have been good, and for you too. From
Yeah.
what you've said.
For sure. And then
And having mentioned quarantine, just to put this in there,
Yeah.
Meditation is probably something a lot more people should be doing these days, simply because of the times we're living through. Before, the world kind of went a little crazy.
Yeah, this
Everybody had something to worry about anyway, and now we've got all of these external factors that people are anxious about that they have no control over. So meditation is a really good way, if you want to start it, to just try to deal with those types of anxieties as well.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
And plus, if you're stuck at home, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. Because this year has been nothing like any other year that I've experienced in my life. Like, I remember I will be a grandfather and I will sit down with my grandchildren and be like, you kids don't know anything about 2020. Let me tell you about that crazy year.
The
and
old
just sort of
2020 story.
And just list off all the things that went wrong that year. But I could also relay that information, like, oh, this is how I dealt with it, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And talk to them about meditation.
See?
So,
they're good things will
passing
come out
down
of
knowledge to other generations.
it. That's right.
So, all right, and so my next question is going to be how, and I think we've kind of touched upon this already a little bit, how has meditating helped you so far?
Oh, well, it's a pleasure for me to do it now. It's a chance to take time out of my day just to be, just to have quiet time, and just to try to calm my mind, because like I said, we all have things that we worry about. I worry about. I'm a worrier, I always have been. Like you were saying, when you were in high school, I had the same experience, except I think I had terrible anxiety, and I was just so shy when I was a teenager. It was debilitating almost. And if I had had this at my disposal back then, maybe it would have helped. But that just wasn't a thing that we did in our family.
Yeah.
You can't imagine, your grandparents sitting around meditating. It would have helped, but
Yeah, because that was what,
I was a kid in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, I was in high school and college in the late 80s.
Yeah,
I was
maybe
in
the
college.
hippies in the 70s had it right.
Yeah, I think meditation still had that kind of hippie connotation to it back then. It was still kind of like a really,
It was more of like an aesthetic It seemed like it was a very
Yeah,
aesthetically
and it seemed like,
sort of.
there were a lot of cults that it got tied up in a lot of baggage that it shouldn't have been, because, and that was part of my problem when I first approached it. I had that baggage because of the way I was raised, and even though you and Dan and Lisa were talking about it all the time. I mean, obviously, I don't think you guys are crazy, but I was like, yeah, well, that's just not for me. Some people it's okay, but it's just not for me. But I think it's for anybody who wants to lessen their anxiety, or just to have just some really nice, to take a moment out of their day to have a really nice calming experience.
Yeah.
And to work at that, because the longer you work at it, you will definitely see some differences. And like you said, I think it can also have differences or can make differences physically
Yeah.
in your you'll have a brighter outlook. You'll have more energy if you take time out to just take a break. So
Yeah, people notice when there's something different about you. I remember one particular day, in one of my classes, one of my friends was like, "You're glowing today. Is there anything different?" I'm like, "No, I'm just having a good day." So stuff like that sort of like radiates, and people will notice for sure.
yeah, it definitely starts to show. And that's the other thing about meditation. It's not just beneficial for you, it's beneficial for everyone around you, because of the effect it has on inner peace, I guess, is
Yeah, it's a
really
good way
the
to
way
put
to
it.
put it. So,
So for how meditating has helped me so far, so ever since I started doing it consistently, I've noticed that whenever I have feelings of stress or anger or things like that, I've noticed that it manifests in less time. So like I'll experience that emotion in less time than I would have a couple years ago. So I've really noticed a difference in how I handle dealing with those specific emotions. So that's something, it's pretty incredible, especially when you have the awareness of that. Like I think the other day when I was working, somebody said something that made me upset, and I remember I just experienced the anger for maybe it was like 30 seconds to a minute, and then it just went away naturally, just because of like the practice that I had been doing with meditating and bringing it back to the present moment. So that's something that I've clearly noticed about myself recently.
yeah, that's true. It will, we all, as we were saying, are human, and we experience the full range of emotions, but it will, instead of getting angry at something and then pouting and being, brooding about it the whole day and then ruining your day
And
and
bottling
everybody
it
else
up.
around you, you'll just acknowledge it and say, okay, I'm feeling angry right now.
Yeah.
So go ahead and feel angry, but then it's done.
Let it flow through you.
Yeah.
Let it
So then,
pass.
like, we just we just watched the trailer for the new Dune movie coming
Oh
out,
my god,
and
I'm
there's
so excited.
there's a line in that book, in the movie, in the trailer, called "Fear is the mind killer."
Brilliant.
And he says, "I am going to let the fear pass through me, but I will still be here." And even though it's from a science fiction book, it's full of, that statement is full of
From the
wisdom.
60s.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great
John
book,
Herbert,
by the
was that
way.
the
You
guy
should
who
read
wrote
it.
it?
What's that?
What's the guy's name? John Herbert? The guy who
Frank
wrote-
Herbert.
Frank Herbert. Maybe he was a hippie.
Well, maybe he was some kind of proto hippie. It was
Because like some of
1965
those,
when he wrote
some
it.
of the
so-
lines from the book sound very like
Yeah,
you know,
it's
meditative.
actually, there's a lot of meditative,
Content.
mindfulness type of content in the novel. You'd be surprised. But that line stuck out at me when we watched the trailer today. It's, because it's very apropos of what
and
we're
that's one of the
talking
more
about.
famous ones.
Yeah.
Famous quotes from the book, right?
Yes, that is a famous quote from the book. That's why they put it in the trailer, I'm guessing.
At the end, yeah.
So
All right, so we're gonna move on to the final question, and then we're gonna wrap up today's episode. So the final question I have for you, like, what is your favorite type of meditation? Do you prefer a guided meditation? Do you prefer sitting in silence? Do you prefer a mantra meditation? Do you like to have music on in the background? Like, what's your go-to meditation?
Well,
And I know you just started recently, so you're still trying to discover new things. So
yeah, I'm still. I've done both. Um, I've done guided, and I've done the ones where you just sit there in silence and try to focus. And being new, the ones where you sit there in silence are much more difficult, obviously, because you don't have. I wouldn't call it a distraction, but you don't have the help of someone, kind of prodding you as to how you should go through this meditation. And so at this point, I like the guided meditations because I'm getting more out of it simply because for me, they're easier, which is kind of a lazy thing to say, but I am also I'm still doing the other type, which is just silence, because those are the more challenging ones, but they're gonna help you hone that skill a lot quicker, and you're gonna be much better at it if you do that. I think, but that's where I'm at right now in the few months I've been doing it. I'm doing both. Lisa suggested a couple of guided ones that I've been doing, which are very good. And
the ones on Mindful Me.
yeah. The only thing I will say on the guided meditations, yes, and of course the ones on Mindful Me, the ones about the guided meditation, the only problem is I find sometimes I will be so relaxed that sometimes I will be drifting off to sleep. That's one thing you have to be, especially if you're laying down. That's one thing you have to be careful of, is not to fall asleep.
Yeah, that's a very common thing that happens, especially like when you're just starting off. It's happened to me a couple times where I get so relaxed and I'm like, whoa, I feel in like a dreamy, sleepy type state.
Yeah.
But over time, there's like different like meditation courses that talk about how to deal with the feeling of being sleepy and how to not fall asleep and things like that. So,
yeah, and that's just a minor issue I'm having. I think I've only done that once or twice.
Yeah, and especially when you're really tired from the day, specifically on that day. It happens. So
yeah.
So for me personally, my favorite type of meditation, I don't really have one favorite, but I like a bunch. So I like guided meditations, and I also like silent meditations. But lately, I've been doing a 20-minute meditation, not in complete silence. So what happens is in the background, I'll be playing something. So one of my favorite video games of all time is Skyrim, and it has one of the best soundtracks ever. And there's this track that's 45 minutes long called Skyrim Atmospheres, and it's a very meditative, very relaxing piece of music. And I like to put that on in the background while I do my 20-minute meditation, and that's sort of like been my go-to recently.
Yeah, that's the one that put me to sleep.
Really?
Because but it's really good. It's if anybody out there has a chance to listen to it, you should, because it's a beautiful soundtrack. But it is so relaxing, and if you use it as part of your meditation, it's really nice. If that's the type of meditation you want to engage in. So you have all kinds of options. You can there's an app called Headspace, which is excellent.
Headspace is terrific as well. Yeah.
And most of those meditations are the silent type, where it's just you listening to your own breath. But they have courses on there that will gradually work you up to different levels.
Yeah.
So you can start, and I did that. I did the full basic course, I think.
I've done it as well.
Yeah, and there's that, and then of course, if you go on YouTube, there's dozens, if not hundreds, of guided meditations you could find.
And we have so many on our website as well. I think we have over.
And of course, yes, we have all of our guided meditations on Mindful Me. You should definitely check those out first.
Ryan has done a couple of them. Did you have fun doing those?
Yes, I actually enjoyed reading those. Yeah, it was fun.
See, I'll listen to everybody else's meditation on Mindful Me, but I can't listen to my own because just the thought of me relaxing to my own voice is just not. I don't know.
Yeah, I couldn't do that either. I can't.
So maybe
I can't.
that's just something I gotta get over, but like I can't.
No,
listen
that's
to my
just
own
that's
voice.
common with everybody. Nobody likes the sound of their voice.
Is that like a scientific thing that like everybody just doesn't
There's
like
a
the sound of
reason.
their voice on
There
a
is a
recording?
scientific reason for it. I'm not sure what it is.
So-
I watched some documentary where they were talking about
But
that.
it's very common. Like everyone I know is like, I don't like the sound of my voice on a recording, and I'm just like,
Or they're
Really?
they're totally shocked. They're like, I don't sound.
I was like,
that.
it's like I sound really nasally.
like Lois Griffin.
Yeah,
Peter.
All right, so that is actually going to wrap up today's episode. Thank you, Dad, for being here and for subbing.
Thank
in for
you.
Dan. So hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. So don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms, and you can also listen to this podcast on several different platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify and many others. So don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms, including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we have a TikTok as well. And that's going to be at mindfulme Inc. And then also don't forget to sign up on our mailing list at mindfulme.org. That is going to be mindful with 2 L's, me.org. And I want to thank you all again for listening this week.
Yes,
and
thank you, everybody.
can't wait to see
Like
you guys.
and subscribe.
Can't wait to see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching this episode of mindWATCH with Daniel and Thomas. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to visit our website, mindfulme.org, for resources just like this. Also, follow us on social media at mindfulme Inc. We're now available on Google Podcasts, Zencast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere else you get podcasts. All you have to do is search Mindful Me. That's mindful spelled with 2 L's, space me. We can't wait to see you on there, and have a great rest of your day.